Hey losers, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with the books that I read in the last half of April. So I'm going to be wrapping up my old school April reads, which is kind of bittersweet. I'm a little bit sad about it, but I did read some really cool things. I actually read a shitload of books this month because some of them were shorter, honestly. But I'm still like excited for myself, proud of myself, excited to tell you about them. Some were just okay, but also I read some really good books too. So let's start out with my stats before I forget. So in total for the whole month, I read 19 books, including one that I DNF'd, which I will tell you about. 12 of these were off my TBR, so that means I owned them previous to this year. In total, I read 5,924 pages, which is about 197 pages per day. I read 9 horror books, 2 literary fiction books, a romance, a crime novel, 2 nonfiction books, 2 fantasy books, and 2 thrillers. The oldest book I read this month was published in 1977. Then we jumped to 1990, 1992, 1993, 1995. Then we're in 2004, 2016, big jump there. 2017, I read 2 books published in 2019, 1 from 2021, 2 from 2022, 1 from 2023, and 5 new releases. So those were published in 2024. As far as the Read What You Own challenge goes, I read 12 total that count towards that. So I'm at 71%. Will I be able to finish it within 2 months? Maybe? I don't know. That's a lot. That would mean I would have to read 15 books. I'd have to read approximately 15 books in the next 2 months that were, oh wow. I was really hoping I would finish it by my birthday so I could do a birthday book haul. Maybe oh wow, I don't know. That's kind of makes me sad thinking about the fact that maybe I'll have to. Oh no, I'm having a crisis. Okay, I'm not gonna think about it right now. We don't have to go into that right now. Okay, anyway, let's start with the books that I did not own that I listened to on audio this month. Okay, let's start with the DNF. I borrowed this from my library. It's called My Name Was Eden, and I think this was on my most anticipated lists. This is by Eleanor White, and this takes place somewhere in the UK. I feel like England, but I could be wrong. I feel like I'm saying that just because the narrator had a British accent. This, I think, is labeled as a horror book, but it definitely didn't have like straight up horror vibes to me personally. I DNF'd it around maybe like almost 50%, maybe like 45%. It wasn't a very long book. And this is it's from the mother's perspective, but she is having concerns when her daughter Eden has a near-death experience. She drowns and then is like resuscitated, and now says that she is, oh god, what was his name? Eli. And the mother's like, oh, Eli. Oh. And you're like, well, why does that matter? And it's because Eli was a vanishing twin. And you're like, well, what's a vanishing twin? And they explain it. It's that when the mother was pregnant, the first few months of her pregnancy, she was pregnant with twins, and they ended up naming them Eden and Eli, but Eli didn't make it quite through the pregnancy. Very early in the pregnancy, Eli was, I guess, absorbed, or however that works, into Eden, but now, Eden's saying she's Eli, and so it's like, ooh, kind of spooky, you know what I mean? So it's, a weird thing. The premise, very interesting to me. However, I thought it was just very boring, really, is what it came down to. Nothing was really happening. there are some sinister tones with like what's happening with Eden/Eli, but when you're halfway through the book and it's like, I don't care, I decided to put it down. That's all. And that's all I really have to say about it. It's kind of like a psychological thriller, it felt like to me, which I like those, but this one just didn't quite hit the mark for me. So I decided to stop spending my time with it. Next on my list is Sociopath by Patric Gagne, I think her last name is pronounced. This one I got through Libro FM, their ALC program, and I was really stoked when I saw that this was one of the picks for this month. I was very excited because I kept seeing this and I was like, oh, because it's like a memoir written by this woman who has been diagnosed with sociopathy, and it talks about her experiences growing up and stuff like this. How she got into her field and her life and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. However, I do wonder, and I feel a little bit bad as a not sociopath, questioning the authenticity of this, especially because I believe this is written totally anonymously. So it's like, and I understand why. So it's like, there's no way to, I guess, check the authenticity. There is the authenticity. And, things like that. It's like, it's one of those, when it comes to memoirs, it's like, we just really have to take this person's word for everything that's happened and all these conversations and things like that. And when it's somebody who does not feel compelled to tell the truth, and she's very straightforward about that, somebody who does not feel compelled to tell the truth anyways, and then also has this cloak of anonymity. Can we take what she says with any credibility? I don't know. So I think like for entertainment purposes, so great. But I think also I will take what happens here with a grain of salt. Like for me, I'm going to say this is very entertaining, and I'm not going to take any real life, unfortunately, I'm not going to take any like real life info. I'm not going to take anything in this as fact for myself. I think that's how I'm going to deal with this. But it was really interesting. And I hope, what happened here happened here. But it's so hard to know, I mean, there have been other memoirs that have been written that have come out as fake, and so it's just so hard to know. It's so hard to know. I mean, look at like James Frey, A Million Little Pieces. So yeah, and then and then the last one that I listened to on audio was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I was very, very excited about this as well. This is one of Leigh Bardugo's adult novels, which I've really, for the most part, enjoyed, except for Hellbent. I wasn't super stoked on that one, but I really loved Ninth House. It's not the only one I've liked. Wait. Okay. That's funny. I guess I'm thinking about how much I love Ninth House, and it makes it seem like I have loved so many of her books. But I did really love Ninth House, and I liked The Familiar a lot. This was a new release, as was Sociopath and My Name Was Eden. But this is a fantasy book. I rented this from my library, and this was like a historical magic-y book about a woman named Lucia. And I believe this takes place in like an alternate Spanishy, magical Spain. Spanish. It takes place in a magical Spain. And so there's like these religious tones to it because of the magic, which I really liked. It's like, because this there is a very fine line that people with these gifts are towing. And it's like, if for 1 second the church thinks that this might be heresy, like, you're fucking out of here. You know what I mean? And it's like, even there is a character who can speak with angels, and it's like, even that, it's like, you better be fucking careful. So Lucia has a little bit of this magic, and she's been keeping it to herself, and she is a scullion maid for a slightly well-to-do woman who is very deeply unhappy, and she catches Lucia using this magic and exploits it, and it becomes, oh boy, it just really puts them in a situation that neither of them expected it to, and there becomes this romance, and Lucia gets tutored by this man for this competition, and it's very interesting. It really has a lot of layers to it, and I'm not really sure how far to go into the story, but it's very good. And I liked it, but there also, I don't know if it's the audio, so I'm really thinking that I might buy a copy for myself, even though it's like, this is not exactly like a favorite, but I did really like it. I'm wondering if maybe the audio made it so it's like I was dipping in and out too much, you know, which sometimes does happen with me in audio, even though I do listen to audiobooks fairly frequently, you know, but there were parts that, like, oh my god, it just had me, and I was there, and then there were parts where I'm like, huh, this seems like it fits into the story strangely, but I don't know. So I don't know if it's me, it's the audiobook, I don't fucking know, but I did like this quite a lot. And then I also read Head Like a Hole by Andrew Van Wey. This came out in 2022. And this is a horror book with, I felt like, very slight cosmic elements, and I did still like it. I mean, maybe you guys know, I don't really love cosmic horror a ton, and so I tend to lean away from that in stories, but this I did really like. This is set in the 90s, which I also just love, and we're following, oh gosh, who's our main character? Megan. It's got multiple timelines, so like in the present she's being interviewed by this like podcast investigator guy, right? And so you know that like something bad happened in her past, and then you're in the timeline where it's like still something bad happened in the past, but she doesn't have a memory of it because she was in a car accident, and so you still really don't know what happened. So it's very mysterious. There are a lot of strange elements, and no matter where I was in the book, it's like I really was so fucking curious about what was happening. There is this head that gets pulled up from the ocean, and despite it being a severed head, it can talk. It's really weird. It's a very strange book. Really good. I liked this a lot, and I would really like to read the author's newer book, which is still like a year old by now, I think. So, and I think it's also cosmic-y, but you know what? I'm willing to give it a try, and hopefully it hits that sweet spot where it's like cosmic weird, but still not too much. And I don't know. We'll see, right? And then I read A Spell for Chameleon by Piers Anthony. This was published in 1977. So this is a dusty old, musty fantasy book. This is the first of his Sanct novels, which I don't know if any of them go together. I've only read a couple. So I think, I believe, the ones that I've read at least were all standalone. But they take place in the same world, Sanct, which is a magic peninsula that is connected to a non-magical world. And it happens to look like Florida, which is kind of funny. So it's like if Florida was magic, but still connected to the United States. And in this story, we follow Bink, who lives in Xanth, but in Xanth, if they don't manifest any magical ability by the time that they're 25, they're exiled to the regular world, which they call Mundania, and he really like doesn't want that to happen. So he decides to go visit the great magician Humphrey, who could answer any question for him, right? So he goes on a little bit of a journey. It's one of those novels where a character is going on a journey and they meet people along the way and stuff like that. It was nice to revisit this, I guess, but there are definitely things, I can't remember how long it's been since I've read this, but there are definitely things that I picked up on now that I don't really remember being so weird when I was a kid, especially the way that they talk about women in this book. And it's like, okay, Bink's a young dude, right? But it's like every woman he meets in this book, it's like about her looks. Is she hot? Is she dumb? Is she hot? Is she dumb, or is she smart? Would she make a good match for him? Like, is she hotter than his girlfriend? You know, and then it's just like, oh my god, it's so much of that. So it got a little bit grating, and I get that it's, you know, it's from the 70s. I'm reading it, you know, almost 50 years later, and it's a little bit, like I said, it's irritating to read. It's like if it were anything repeated that much, you know? If you were like, wow, my feet really itch, and it's like repeated that much in the story, it'd be like, oh wow, holy shit, this is too much feet itch, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, glad I read it, and I'm also curious kind of about like the other Xanth books that I have, and like, what? Are they that weird and annoying? I don't know. Kind of makes me want to read them again. Okay, what's next? A Child Alone with Strangers. Oh, I listened to this on audio because this was a Libro FM ALC a couple months ago, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited. I hadn't had the chance to read it, and then it was Christine, one of Christine's host picks, Secrets Read. Make sure to check out her channel. And it was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity to rack up some points, some extra points for my team. And this was it was so great. I was like, oh, I gotta read this. I gotta buy a copy of this book. I loved it so much. And then Rachel, Books on the Brain, sent me a copy. Oh, this was like such a pleasant surprise. And it's just so perfect that I listened to it and I was like, oh my god, I need to get a copy. And then like magic, a copy showed up on my door. So I am so stoked. This book, I mean, the audiobook was kind of long, but I had no idea how chunky this book is. And it was a great book. Like this was a 5-star read for me. This was a really strange book. This is like Stephen King tier storytelling, in my opinion. How Philip Fracassi manages to, I don't know how he does it. It's like every person has their own universe, just like normal people, and he gets them all together in this story, and they seem like real ass people doing shit. So this is about a little boy named Henry, and he has been kidnapped, but the kidnappers definitely have gotten more than they bargained for, because Henry isn't a normal boy. He is very fucking special. And two, there is some sort of fucking creature in the woods near the house that they've chosen to hang out at while they wait for the ransom money. And that's all I want to tell you about this. It's so fucking weird. It's just, this book is bananas. It's so good. Like, it makes you kind of sad and like creeps you out. This book, it has a lot of like skin crawly parts where I was like, it was just really fucking good. So great host rec, Rachel. Again, thank you so much. That was just really fucking nice of you to send me a copy, and I'm really excited to put this on my shelf. One of my favorite books I've read this year. I also read Witch by Christopher Pike, which came out in 1990. This book I didn't love. This is only the third Pike I've read, so I'm not like an expert on his, but I definitely liked the other two I read more as far as the plot and the characters and stuff like that. This is about Julia, and she is a witch, and she comes from a line of witches. And she has this ability to look into a pool of water, and she can see, she can heal people, and she can know things that are happening in far off places. But she was warned to never ever look into a pool if moonlight is shining on it, but she does it just once, and she sees the future, she thinks. And this alters the path for her. This terrible thing happens, and now she wants revenge on the people who have done it. But I will say, it's like, I feel like the character work in here seems really wonky, because it's like, Julia's this nice girl, and then all of a sudden it's like she's like balls to the wall, John Wick almost, in such a strange way. It doesn't, even though we're not with the character for very long before this happens, it seems like a really weird change to me. And then, I don't know, it got kind of boring to me. It just wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my favorite Christopher Pike. Like, the kind of woo-woo, like, where witches stuff was kind of funny. And some of the reveals about who's who in this story were interesting, but yeah, ultimately it was not my favorite, but that's okay. You know, it happens sometimes. Okay, and then I read Escape from the Carnival of Horrors, which is the first Give Yourself Goosebumps book by RL Stine. These are the Choose Your Own Adventure books. So if you haven't read one of these are like very fun. You read a page. If you've never read one, you read a page and it will give you instructions on the bottom of the page. Some of them are just like, go to the next page. Some of them are, you make a choice. Like, for example, you read this one and it says, if it's sunny out, turn to page 45. If it's raining or if it's nighttime, turn to page 85. So it's like, you choose your own adventure. It's like that, because it's literally that. And then there are 20 different scary endings. So I had a lot of bookmarks in this, like going back and trying to get all the different endings. I don't know if I got all 20 of them, but I really tried to get a lot of them. I think my favorite one was one where you get launched into space. They're like, oh, you're part of the space program now. And you're like, wait, what? There's one where you're stuck in the mirror house, and it's like a repeating thing where it's like, you turn to the left, turn to page blah, blah, blah. You turn to the right, turn to page blah, blah, blah. And it's like back and forth, back and forth. It's like, oh, that's really funny. So, yeah, it was fun. Like, the entertainment level of this is very high, but the substance, the plot wise, at least for this one, I haven't really read very many of the Choose Your Own Adventures one. I think I had like, when I was a kid, I had like Batwing Hall, and I maybe had like one or two others. I know I read Batwing Hall, and I can't remember if I read any of the other ones, so I just don't know for sure. Based on my experience with this, not a lot of plot substance, you know what I mean? Because you're jumping around, there's a lot of shit going on, but entertainment value, very high. And this one was published in 1995. All right, the other Goosebumps book I read this month was Say Cheese and Die. This one was published in 1992. And if you remember, the TV episode of this had Ryan Gosling as a little baby boy. This is about Greg and his friends. They find a camera in an old building, and Greg discovers that when he takes pictures of his friends, the pictures aren't exactly what he took a picture of. And then it seems like the pictures are kind of predicting future disasters. And so he's like very scared of both like telling, for some reason, like telling his friends what's happening, and also like taking pictures and then like, oh no, what do we do? So this was an okay Goosebumps. I don't think this is one of my favorite ones. I do really like the goofy camera thing, like the cursed objects. I don't know, it's just an okay Goosebumps. I also read Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter, and this was published in 2023. This is a literary fiction book that is kind of a weird one. It definitely has some magical realism in it. And I did like this, but I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't like it more. And I think one of the things is that I really wish it would have pushed into like the weirdness or the uncomfortable situations a little bit more. But this is about Cassie, and she works this fucking nightmare job in Silicon Valley. It is a nightmare job where her boss is a nightmare, like gaslighting, maybe like purposely sabotaging, things like that. She's got this apartment she can't really afford. She is aware of the extreme wealth versus the extreme poverty in the area that she lives in. And then to top it off, she thinks that she might be pregnant. So it's good. It's a good one if you are looking for something in like a corporate setting, which I find interesting. It's got, like I said, this strange, like these strange moments of magical realism where you're like, what the fuck? I really like that, and I wish it would have pushed into that just like a little bit fucking more. And then also the uncomfortable shit. And I won't get into any specifics, but I just wish, I think that for me personally, I think I would have liked it better if it had, you know, pushed into that stuff a little bit more. It's like some parts of it were like, oh yes, I love, and then but then there was a lot of stuff that was just okay. So all right, and then the last book this month, this is Survivor by JF Gonzalez, and this is not a book for everybody. This is definitely extreme horror. It's got extreme content. Oh boy, this has got a list of content warnings. Make sure you look those up if you need them. It's got, I just can't even, like, I can't say the words on YouTube. So that should tell you what's in it. Or that should tell you how extreme this is. This is about Lisa, who is kidnapped, and she finds out that her kidnappers want to film her. They want to make a movie, a certain sort of movie that I don't even know if I can, like I said, I don't know if I can say these words on YouTube, but I think you can probably, I think you could probably infer what I mean by this. So it's brutal. This is a really brutal book. There are parts that I had to skip over. but I really liked it. This book, I really had a hard time putting down. I needed to know what was going on. I needed to know what was going to happen. I think that it was just so, that like, despite the really hard content, like, I'm really not an extreme horror reader at all. I just really had to know what was going to happen. And yeah, I don't know. I do have some complaints. He uses the word trust up, trusting. You know, he used that so many times. It's like, oh my God, please find a thesaurus. That's just a you know, when it's like 3 times on 3 pages, you know you've used it too many times. Also, one thing was that the characters would just rehash past events over and over, and it's like, my friend, we have read the book and we do know what happened in the book. So we don't need the characters to go over what happened in the book already. We know, we were there. Especially when it's like, oh, this content is troubling, and it's like he's just really pounding it in there, like, you remember that, and it's like, yes, I remember it, I'm trying not to remember it. So, yeah, I wish I would have marked a passage where that happened so I had a good example of it, but it's like, you know, it's a little bit egregious almost, that kept happening, and it's like each time it would go to another character, it'd be like, and when he did that film with, you know, those people, it's like, we know about that, we were there, we know about it. You don't have to talk about it as if it were a thing that we weren't there for. So that's a complaint I have, but like, ultimately I did really like the book. And I'm a little bit surprised, but I really liked it. So there you go. Those are the books that I read in April. A lucrative, does that word apply to reading? A lucrative reading month. It was a month of great riches, great enrichment maybe for my brain. I'd love to know if you read any of these, what you thought. Did you participate in Old School April? Did you have a blast? What did you do this April? What were your favorite books you read this month? I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later. Goodbye.